Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the What Kind of Man at YouTube with another modelling video. Today we are up to our 10th Honing Your Airbrush Skills video, which I'm quite proud of. I try to make it a monthly thing, you know, misses out here and there, but these are the hardest videos to make because I have to guarantee once a month the airbrush goes in my hand. I'm practicing something and I'm doing something in the way and relevance of modelling. With the Gunpla Builders World Cup around the corner, it is getting a bit tighter, it is getting a bit harder, but we're going strong. From time to time I will still be talking about the maintenance and tuning of your airbrush, but we're going more into techniques, additives, extra things that you can do with your airbrushing and use around your airbrushing. Again, this series is about the DH103 style of airbrush. That's the one made by Airfix, Mr. Hobby, the cheaper ones, you name it. Did I say Airfix? I meant Sparmax. But you get the drift. I'm actually going to cover every type of model that these videos can be followed or advice used for actually cleaning them. Your finer airbrushes such as your Iwatas and Pachets and whatnot, you're better off following the community of those airbrush users on how they maintain and operate their airbrushes, though the techniques regarding the actual painting styles and the practicing once a month drawing lines, that is all definitely relevant, as well as some other ideas. I know with your finer airbrushes, they need a more thinner oil, something of the consistency of machine, compressor, or sewing machine oil. That all aside, let's talk about what we'll be doing in this video. We'll be getting into a little masking, especially your liquid masks or sol masks. And then later on we'll get into a little bit of metallics and an item with multiple details and how we can colour in the whole item and spray without actually masking at all. So the two different extremes that one would do on a model kit. Again, a bit of a disclaimer, none of this is an official tutorial. All of this is experimental and what I'm doing at the time, what my findings are, what my personal opinions are. My personal opinions or style may not work with everyone. It might work quite well. I suggest experimenting with caution and contribute. Do your own painting sessions, share us your lines, and share us your experiences with airbrushing. We'll all grow as a community. A quick talk about my compressor. As we know, the past couple of months it has been having issues with its pressure switch, cutting out, overheating, and I'm also finding that it's overdrawing the electrical circuit that it's on. I have a radio attached to it, as you may sometimes hear in the video, and occasionally when it starts drawing really hard and spluttering, the audio cuts out, the lights dim, so this is starting to become electrically unsafe. Normally I would suggest disconnecting it, cutting the lead and throwing it out. I'm a electrical technician, so I'm very careful. I've done a safety inspection of it. Doesn't seem to be dangerous yet, though I'm going to be squeezing the remainder of its life out until after the Gunpla Builders World Cup. In the event it does die, I have a very small Sparmax compressor that I used to use when I bought my first airbrush, no tank. I've also noticed that I'm starting to get quite a heavy leak out of the regulator, so I have to constantly tune it around to plug the hole while trying to get the right PSI. That's also getting very annoying. And when I leak out water, the inner tank is starting to rust. So yeah, this compressor has served me very well, but it's definitely on its last legs. Now, first of all, I'm going to do an experiment. There is a certain First, Second World War camouflage scheme I've seen on aircraft and French tanks. Sort of this black scheme with all these blobs of different colours to break up the pattern of the machine. I'm going to be attempting that with mask on this piece of styrene plate. At the back of it's got a tiny bit of off-cut brass curled at the back to easily add a clip. Immediately spraying black and applying Mr. Liquid Mask. It's a very interesting product. Before we're getting into that, I am currently spraying Lacquer Black Mr. Colour. It's thin 50-50, just very lightly dusted on in 2 to 3 wide pullback coats, approximately 20 centimeters away from the surface, allowing each thin layer to dry before applying the next without orange peeling. Now, there's a few liquid masks on the market. I use Mr. Hobby Mr. Masking Sol Neo, a greenish sort of latex-like liquid texture. Pretty much the instructions, very basic. You shake it up, you store it very tight, or the lid closed tight. Mix it up nice and good. There comes with a brush in the inside of the bottle. I recommend removing it and disposing it immediately, and using a finer brush to paint on like you'll do with paint, whatever shapes you desire. I use a thin brush to get the outline, and then a fatter brush to colour in. Once it starts drying, be very careful with dried mask when you applying wet mask, because it can peel the dry mask off. It is extremely sticky, very difficult to work with, so it takes a bit of practice to operate. Now, it's going to be a bit tricky. I need to do multiple layers, so I want to keep the paint coats as thin as possible, not caking it on too hard, so it's thin passes, thin with lacquer. So lacquer paint sits on this product very well, even being a latex based product. Now, another important thing is once you apply, it takes about half an hour to an hour to dry, and you'll be able to see in my work in progress video snippets edited up together. When it applies, it's a very vibrant bright colour, and it dulls and becomes darker as it dries. It gets to a very dark, dead, almost translucent state when it's fully dried. If it's almost completely translucent, it's kind of very thin, so I like to put a couple of layers on very carefully, or apply it very thickly and in a lumpy way to see where it actually is, and it easily removes without complication. Once absolutely fully dry, you're not to touch the product again. Even through the paint, it is very sticky, and touching the surface may move or disrupt the mask and ruin your paint job. If the mask is very thin, it might be difficult to remove, thus damaging the paint. So there's a few cautions you need to take. Definitely prime the surface. When you put your first coat down, put a few coats of clear. It sticks to glossy paints pretty well, and it removes without any issue. Matte paints, there may be complications, but this is just me operating it over the years. This product also has a short shelf life, and it does go off and turns into a hard rubber inside the bottle after a few years, so that's just something to keep in mind. Very expensive at $10 a bottle, but I absolutely love the stuff. Once you put your final coat of paint on, again applying it very thinly, give it about a day or so to fully dry, mature and harden, and under running water, peel it very gently off with your fingers, no nails, and any tiny bits that may be stuck, just stick blue tack to the surface and lift off, hoping that it would collect and stick to the blue tack and remove straight from your model. Rinse with water, rub with the soft bit of your fingers or just the pads of your fingers, and it's absolutely done. Immediately, due to the fragile nature of the thin paint, put a few coats of clear down. Now, as you know, this mask is a bit troublesome like any other mask, and since this is the most complex scheme I have ever done, it's mostly used for canopies on clear pieces and camouflage markings, or just masking very tiny, hard to reach areas that would be near impossible to apply with masking tape. Amazing product, though I sometimes practice or do quick tests with it before I do a big project. This is going to be the most ambitious scheme that I will do, and it's come out quite nice. I'm extremely happy with the finished result. If you really closely inspect, you'll see little white dots. That's because the paint's been lifted off the surface of the plastic from the mask, so that's just evident that priming is definitely a must. If this piece was primed, those small speckles wouldn't have been removed, and that would be a damaged model finish. All in all, I'm extremely satisfied. This experiment was a complete success and will be applied to my XAML inspired scratch build or kit bash, and I'll be able to be confidently doing it across rougher textures like Zimmerit and whatnot. So stay tuned. Instead of doing base colors, there's going to be shading. So, you know, of the brown, I'll go from a dark brown to a lighter brown, bottom to top, and so on and so on. Should be fairly effective, but I just really like the look of this scheme. I've seen it on real vehicles from reference material, and gives you guys a bit of an idea if you want to attempt something like this. Now for the next segment of this show, we'll be painting the Zaku Big Gun, just doing some standard shading and painting some interesting areas. No masking whatsoever, just tight control over the airbrush and colouring in the appropriate areas without any overspray. If overspray does occur, you just change colours and recolour in the areas that has been affected. So there might be a little bit of that, but every time you make a mistake, I suppose you learn by it and you try not to do it again. So I occasionally come across this problem, and a lot of people do as well. Very large, awkward places that you can't peg the whole piece onto an alligator clip without it being overbalanced or clipping onto something that's not vital detail that's in a paint spot. So you can see that's the part that clips into the model, and I actually drilled out using a pin vise and a knife 2 tabs, so I'm able to paint it with great ease. And when this snaps together, like so, the holes will never be seen. I've done this with the majority of the big gun from the Zaku Big Gun. First I'll be painting the large ammunition or magazine barrel. I'll be painting with Tamiya primer. A lot of people have been asking me lately. It is a lacquer-based paint, requires lacquer thinner, unlike its enamel or acrylic versions. And because due to its thick and micro-filling nature, you mix it in a separate container before you add into the airbrush in case there's any thicker sludge at the very bottom for a consistent and easy spray. I've found, listening back to this video, there's a high squealing pitch sound from my airbrush, so if you hear a whistle or a squeal, it means your paint's a tad too dry and retardant and thinner needs to be added. I find the best way to prime, as I do with most of my airbrushing, is dusting on from a slight afar. I always add retardant into my primers, and I keep dusting and I keep spraying around the surface of the kit until all tones and colours are absolute uniform. So if you've got a really dark piece and a light piece and there's a tone difference for absolute ages, I sort of keep building up. But if it's too much of a conflict, you know, you might put a base color later on to cover it, but once I know all pigment density is down pat, that you're going to have maximum stick and maximum effect from your primer. Now the majority of this ammunition or ammo clip or drum is going to be metallic. There's going to be a bit of alclads and shinies and whatnot. So, as we all know, high gloss black is vital, and I've been asked a lot on my Q&A videos if Mr. Surfacer 1500 is appropriate, which it is. You add a lot of thinner, more than normal, and you just keep applying it on layer by layer, kind of thickish. Make sure there's it's going to be drying over a period of time, a little bit of retardant. It wants to be applied nice and wet, so when it dries absolutely flat and not orange peely or textured. And you allow that to dry for a period of time, then making sure you don't put too much that it starts being runny or creating streaks or drips or anything. Then you can just apply some normal Mr. Hobby clear gloss with some thinner, and it should come out fairly Mickey Mouse for your premium metallics. Now with a black base, we're going to start colouring in the different components. I want the inner ring to come out as metallic or copper, so I've just got copper or brass outclad, and using a really fine line, probably as fine as we paint on those pieces of paper during test. I've outlined the two outline areas that I would like the paint job to end, and very carefully, without pulling back and in the same tight spots, colour it in and just overlap the areas a couple of times to make sure the whole surface is consistent and uniformed, so when I paint the other areas in the same fashion, that it's not going to go into the copper or brass area. Now, because that brass was the hardest to paint and there was a lot of those raised edges and whatnot, there needed to be a little pullback, a little colouring in, a little bit of overspray, and the ever so tiniest amount of spray actually tainted the black to slightly of its own colour, which would not have been good when I put the next layer of metallics down. So going back to black paint, I neatened back the copper or brass and then coloured in the areas intended for the next metallic coat. So where I laid down the borders with the black paint in a very thin line is pretty much where it fades from brass or copper to a thin black line next to the next metallic colours. Now, hoping where in the deep recess where the brass or copper is, when I spray the next paint carefully, it's not going to overlap, mist or overspray, because then I'm going to have to go backwards and forwards constantly. So the name of the game is neatness and maximum maintenance and fine painting out of the airbrush, as we've learnt from the previous more maintenance and training elements of this series. The next step, the very top and very bottom, is going to be a non-metallic cap or component. So starting from a very dark blue, the area was majority coloured in, making sure not to cross into the copper area. And then from changes of colour, going lighter and lighter in the blues, they were just ever so slightly sprayed over in the center of the dark blue, and then the lightest blue in the very center of the medium blue and dark blue. I put my fingers over the brass bits, pulled the airbrush back on the lightest blue, and ever so slightly did a tiny dust. For the cylinder all the way around is going to be metallic, and this started off with a very dark burnt iron or a thruster rust colour. Burnt iron is an excellent colour. Coloured in the area, leaving the black panel lines black as if we were poster shading, and then added a tiny line in the middle going up in just plain brown. The rest of the colours shaded on top of that went to a lighter and lighter metallic colour, until the very tip was just a tiny line all the way at the top of pure alclad polished aluminium. So you had this effect of a very rust, very worn out, very dirty aged metal, and the light that catches the sheen of it is just a breath of fresh air, or just a tiniest glint of pure metal that's just caught out in the sun, which isn't really there. It's like a lighting illusion. And if you're aware of filters or clear paints, the hot metal senpai from alclad 2, it is absolutely amazing at just aging metal, where you can really concentrate and spray heavy in some areas and lighten in others, or just dust on in an area just for the ever so slightest worn, weathered look. Very fun paint. The final painting piece of this video will be the top armor piece with Zimmerit. It's also the most basic. We're just going to do a 3-tone shade of 2 greens and some sort of a tan colour. I like to, when shading, have a contrasting colour somewhere in the mix. It just makes it a bit more interesting, and instead of going to straight white, cream is a pretty interesting combination. You'll probably find in future, and like I did with the ammunition barrel, I'd like to blend with a variety of different colors. I've actually went for quite a harsh orange in the middle of greens on a Zaku, and that came out quite lovely. It had just the ever so slightest tinge of a rust effect. So this experimentation is going to be pushed a lot harder after the Gunpowder Builders World Cup. Now, this was all sprayed around the same time as the other components, all in the same day or so. All primed again with Tamiya lacquer, a lot of the advice at the start of that video. Followed all by lacquers. I did a pre-shade of black around the edges and underneath, and proceeded to colouring it in with green. Now, because we're shading, and we need the absolute maximum output of the airbrush. So when I'm talking about the maintenance in the other videos about crooks in the needle and bleeding out all the air of water and whatnot, if you just blast out a heap of water ruining the paint job, or there's a tiny bit of paint splatter, that can ruin everything when you're painting with multiple layers of colours and sprays. Because I've had splattering or the tiniest amount of droplets of paint building up in the nozzle area or around the crown of the nozzle and then blasting tiny droplets all over the model, I always have a tendency of pointing my airbrush away from the model and just giving it a massive spray out of air and probably just a tiny jolt of paint to clear out the line and get it ready for painting. I very regularly test by painting a line.
Percent of you say no, 32% say yes. So have your say at abc.net.au/news. And before I let you go for the evening, Tim Morton joining you next with a full news update. Plans are underway to allow for deceased people in Canberra to be buried without a coffin. The Territory Government is in negotiation with the ACT Public Cemeteries Authority to make natural burials.
Applying translucently. When I do a base coat, it's many layers. So it's nice and thick, it's vibrant, it's uniform on all the pieces regardless of the undercoat. And then when you start shading it and it goes lighter or darker or whatever, you can only put a few layers down, and you can control it by having it so you need multiple layers to make a change instead of one layer to make a change. So as I mentioned before, if your airbrush is whistling, your paint is too thick. When it's far too thin, you can't spray way too much, it needs to be dusted on, and when it's dusted on, everything is easy. It's so much easier that way than having it a lot thicker and trying to paint everything in one pass. It is very basic stuff to say this at this stage, but it's a good reminder, and hell, sometimes I forget and go a bit thick. Again, this video might have come across a bit preachy, or I don't know, don't really care. Though, again, it's just all experiments, not much in the way of tutorialized. But in the end, looking at this finished piece, no masking whatsoever. The pipes underneath that are sort of the brown colour was very tricky. When I coloured that in, it sprayed all sorts of crap underneath it on the gunmetal, so that needed to be resprayed dark gunmetal and highlights of silver. But I've painted those tubes a very dark brown and then a slight highlight around, so that turned out quite nice. And looking at the rustic nature, different panels of metal are slightly different tones because I've just mixed multiple different colours of shading in between the bottom base coat colouring in and the very top finish light sheen dust on. And it just works. I was very happy how this came out. And I'm going to be using these methods more often to give my models more definition, more personality, more different. So I don't have to paint different parts extremely different colours. The majority of it could be a one monochrome effect of colour, or a one single colour scheme colour across the model, but with different shading here and there of different colours mixed in the shading process. Things could be a lot of fun. So this is just adding an extra dimension to painting for the hobby for me, and it's just something that I'm thoroughly enjoying. Now with the overall of this piece, everything was given a few top coats of clear matte, a little bit of black sludge wash wiped back, and just can't be more happy with how this piece has definitely turned out. If the rest of my Gunpla Builders World Cup entry is of the same standard as this gun, yeah, cannot complain whatsoever about the outcome. Now, after all this spraying and painting up this big gun, I'm going to be doing a lot of spraying and a lot of airbrushing for my Gunpla Builders World Cup. So I'm changing the whole process of maintaining my airbrush for a job. More or less, I did the usual strip down, soak in lacquer thinner, and put it in the ultrasonic cleaner for a few hours. Wiped it down nice and good. Flushed out the body with a cotton swab to get rid of any trace of paint and grease. Once it was all dried down, I quite heavily greased the inner part, the spring, the bit where the needle goes into the paint chamber, the air solenoid, the trigger, everything, due to its ability to leak paint due to one of the washers just dying in thinner. And besides the tiniest leak of paint in my first airbrushing round of doing the test lines of lacquer red, that seeped into the grease and changed the colour of the grease slightly. Once it was a good flush out and a good clean, there was no paint leaking whatsoever, unless I pulled the needle out and tipped the paint back while full of paint, or tipped the airbrush back while it's full of paint. But it was just very, very smooth and very, very good to use. Now, looking at past the breakdown of the pieces, the actual test lines, due to my very heavy schedule of finishing up for the Gunpla Builders World Cup, about 4 or 5 weeks to go, it was just a single A4 sheet. Made a couple of mistakes of, you know, the odd splodge or splatter there. If you look really close to the lines, even though they're fairly straightish and thin, there is the tiniest amount of splatter. I haven't cleaned it out for a few months, and the needle and nozzle hasn't been changed out for a while. I should have changed the needle and nozzle, but I'll be doing a lot of priming, and priming is very heavy wear and tear on your airbrush. I'm actually considering buying a 0.5mm Spar Max just for priming and maintaining the two airbrushes one after the other, alternating maintenance. But we'll see how we go after the new year or September. But besides a tiny bit of splatter, not too fast, good enough. Not great, but again, it is a bit rushed. I'll probably concentrate on neatness after the whole thing's rugged up and finished. Again, for people playing at home and watching this, picking up tips, highly recommend just chucking in how you're going with your airbrushing. If you're picking it up at least once a month, if you're not painting a lot, and practicing and drawing some lines. If you just got some paint put aside only for test patterns, it might seem as a slight waste of paint, but for the improvement of skill, I think it's an absolute bargain. And if you want, do a few lines, post it online, social media, whatever, and it might be a bit embarrassing at first, but once you've done it for a few months, you'll actually see a steady stream of improvement. So how some people like to brag about gym working out or weight loss on social media and showing their progress, let's do it with airbrushing. Show us your lines if you wish to play at home. That's it. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, until next time, stay tuned to more tutorials, reviews, and whatnot. This series is quite a lot of fun. Now, for a lot of those that are still watching this series and still watching this far into the video, here's a bit of an Easter egg, because I like to put them in here and there. You're wondering why the lamb chop picture on my frying pan. I've come across an accidental recipe for awesome chops. I was going for a bit of a Polish Balkan style spice mix by rubbing paprika on the meat, and I threw in some curry. So I added curry powder, paprika, a bit of seasoning, rubbed it and massaged it in the meat for a few minutes, refrigerated it for an hour, and just pan fried it with a tablespoon or 2 of extra virgin olive oil, and yeah, just cooked the hell out of it until it was nice and brown and golden, and fed it to my family. Absolutely delicious. So if you're looking for a unique dinner item to have some steamed veggies and rice or whatever carbs you enjoy and some sort of meaty goodness, this is an accidental recipe I kind of come across. So yeah, let me know if you guys cooked it up and how well it tasted and if you enjoyed it. Catch you guys later.